Latrinavox. Collage is lonely. Any League of Legends players? This is the sign you asked for. My parents think nothing is good enough. Up the Ra!
Hello, Lauren.
Hello, Mosa.
Thank you for showing this, the start of an award-winning video. You've just won an OsBar a couple of weeks ago. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
It was during the DeBarra spoken word poetry film workshop part 2 when you were crowned the winner with Latrinavox, and well deserved. And can you explain, in view of your upcoming session on the 1st of December 2021 for the DeBarra spoken word online on Zoom, can you explain what Latrinavox is?
Sure. So, well, a good hint is in the title, which is Latrinavox, which is Latin for voices of the toilet. And it's always been something that I've been captivated by. Going around the world is what people write in bathrooms, but particularly I went back to UCC to do an MA in creative writing starting in 2020, and there's just something about the graffiti in the student bathrooms there that is really magic. And I remember it from my decades previous education in UCC as well. The Boo Library used to be coated with graffiti, and it is quite a conversation that's actually happening in there. It's completely anonymous. It's kind of like an agony aunt column, and people will respond to each other. And I was more than once late for a class because I couldn't leave the bathroom until I had read all of the graffiti in the bathroom. So when I started getting interested in found poetry, I thought, there really is something special here with what's happening here. And so what I did was I took photos of a couple of the cubicles that really had a lot going on in it, and then arranged them together to make a poem. And it was important. Like, I didn't edit any of the words. I didn't say all of the words. Like, not every piece of graffiti, but everything in the poem is just like 100% verbatim off the walls of the toilet.
But you did edit different toilets together in a way.
Yeah, well, I think that most of Latrinavox, it's from 2 cubicles in one toilet. Actually, it's still up in the UCC Students Center. So if you are female and you can get to the UCC Students Center, this graffiti is actually it's still all there, over 2 cubicles. So yeah, and what I did was I just wrote down, I went through all the photographs and I just wrote down line by line all the individual lines, and then sort of arranged them in the poem into a way that it was clear, because visually you can see the conversation very well, but when you take it out of that visual context, it makes a little bit less sense. So that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to make it into a poetry film, is because Latrinavox is one of my favorite poems of mine that I have written, but I always feel like there's some magic that wasn't getting across when I was just reading it aloud. So when I did the DeBarra's workshop of poetry film with Colm Scully, I think it was just like the perfect thing to, it really added a whole new dimension to that poem, which was a favorite of mine, to be able to bring back in those photographs and bring back in those graphics and kind of make it all add up a bit more.
Okay, yeah, and it is great. I mean, it wasn't the most beautiful film in the competition, but somehow it had us all captivated, because, like, every woman that's ever gone to a pub toilet or a student toilet or whatever, we've all seen it, but you were the one who picked it up, and then I found it quite moving, because you sort of see people's inner thoughts as opposed to what we portray to the outside world. What we write on, if we do write on toilet walls, it's a bit private, but then it's there for all to see. Have you ever written on toilet walls?
You know what? I haven't myself, not that I remember. I'm definitely more of a voyeur or a lurker of bathroom graffiti, but I was thinking of going back into the UCC Student Center. I hope this doesn't get me in trouble admitting to, plans for graffiti, but putting up a link to the poem inside in those cubicles, that the poem came from, because I thought that might be fun if anyone, who had originated. I have no idea who originated any of that graffiti, so I thought that might be fun. So I might do that one day. But yeah, as you said, I mean, like, what I'm struck by is the different tones. There's some really, really moving stuff in there, and there's some really like bizarre stuff, and there's some really hilarious stuff, and it's all kind of just mushed together into one like complex conversation that's happening inside in a toilet cubicle. It's a phenomenon, definitely.
I'm told by some men that I related these two, and they said, well, if you go into male toilets, it's very different. Have you any experience of that?
Yes, definitely. Because when I did Latrinavox at first, my idea was, I want to make this a series. And I was remembering the detailed graffiti that was in the Boo library from my younger student days. And like, some of that stuff would be dated as well, all the way back to, the 90s. And I thought I could make a series out of it. And of course, expand it to the man's bathroom. So maybe there could be like, what would happen? How different are these conversations? And to put them side by side. So I did send a couple of my male student friends armed with their camera phones into the male toilets, in the UCC Student Centre and elsewhere. But there really was not, the same conversation was not happening there. Now, I'm not saying the same conversation does not happen in men's bathrooms. I don't know that, but in the bathrooms that they went into, there was either very little graffiti, or maybe a little vulgar drawing and somebody's phone number or something like that. So that the same conversation wasn't happening inside in those bathrooms. And very sadly, for graffiti lovers everywhere, when the UCC Boo Library did their upgrade, they painted over all of that historic graffiti. So short of getting some sort of FBI, wall scanning device, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to get that back. But I'm definitely on the lookout for, every girl's bathroom I go into, now that the pubs are open again, I'll be going in. My camera's always in my pocket, so no graffiti is safe. If I find more of it, I'll be capturing it, and maybe I might be able to do another Latrinavox.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it. Okay, you, Lauren, you've done many things in your life. You started off, you told me you did an MA in computer science 10 years ago in UCC as well.
That's right. Yeah. So I love UCC so much. I'm UCC all the way. I started off, I did an undergrad in English and philosophy. And then I spent a year working minimum wage, and nobody really wanted to hire me with my degree in English and philosophy, sadly. And I was very young. So I went back. At the time, I did have a huge interest in computer science, in websites, how to make websites and usability and all that sort of stuff. So I went back to UCC and I did my master's up there with the computer science crowd, which was a fantastic experience. I ended up working with, the blind community in Ireland about usability, web usability, which was very exciting. And my first job was researching accessible web design, for people who have, challenges accessing technical stuff up in DCU. And that was very cool. And then I went to Vancouver and I was working in the industry there for nearly 10 years before I actually got very sad, because I was 10 years in and I was making, websites for really big business. Do you know what I mean? I just felt like I wasn't doing what I was meant to do. So when I came back to Ireland, I decided, now's the time. I'm going to take the opportunity. And I went back to study creative writing up at UCC to do an MA. And honestly, it was one of the best years of my life. I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay. I'm glad to hear, because you've done quite a lot. One of the things you've done with Emily Tidhurst was the disposable stories, that we also dedicated a session to that.
That's right. Yes, we were very, in one way we were lucky, and in another way we were unlucky to be the COVID year of the MA. So a lot of our classes had to be, online from home, which wasn't great. And there was little to no chance of getting any work experience. There's always work experience as part of that MA. So we had to make our own work experience. We had to make our own opportunities. But ultimately, I think that we were very lucky, because what we ended up doing, I thought, was, above and beyond what we would have been able to achieve had we all individually been in separate work experiences, assisting at festivals and stuff like that. So with the disposable stories, the project was Emily's idea that she was trying to get off the ground, where we all took, kind of an ekphrastic project. We all went and we took photos on the same disposable camera, and then those were printed and distributed as writing prompts, and we collated those together as a book. And we also, as our main class project, we made the Same Page anthology, which is an anthology of poetry and prose that doesn't include our work, but it includes the work of Irish and Irish connected writers. So that was quite a big project, you know, to go from not really knowing anything about the publishing industry or how all of this works, maybe having sent 1 or 2 submissions ourselves, but never having been in an editor role, to getting that project all the way through until it was, you know, a high quality printed book. And now it is on the shelves and available inside Vibes and Scribes inside in Cork City, and a bunch of local bookshops, soon to be Waterstones. It's €10 and 100% of all the profits proceeds are going to the Sexual Violence Centre Cork, which is a great cause.
Okay, great. Yeah. And there is a bit of a downside. I think you said that it's difficult. It's different to get a job after this degree than it was after your previous degree. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely night and day. And I'm really struck by, I suppose, the not so much the attitude, but almost the philosophy. You know, you go into a computer science master's and you know you are coming out of there with a good job. You know you are not making less than, you know, X amount of euros, certainly double, if not triple, you know, minimum wage. And that's if you even find it difficult to find a job. Whereas coming into the MA and even coming out of the MA, you know, even going into the MA, for example, like when I told people I was going to do a master's in science, it's not an MA, it's a MSc in computer science, they were like, oh, wow, you know, like that kind of reaction. When I told them I'm going to be doing an MA in creative writing, they're like, oh, why? What are you going to do? You'll never be able to make any money. So like even just the attitude of like other people was surprising, but I understand why. I mean, like, you know, the arts are very underpaid in Ireland, and definitely writers are very underpaid in Ireland. You know, even a good professional writer who has several books published might not be making, you know, a reliable minimum wage per year, you know, which is it's awful. Like how much Irish art has been lost because, you know, they're having to work other jobs and they're not able, you know, they don't have the financial support to be able to focus you know, on their art, or they don't have the same opportunities that the sciences have for careers when they come out. And I know that there are some absolutely fantastic writers, brilliant writers who were in my year who are coming out and they are finding it difficult to find jobs, and they are getting work as, you know, baristas or bar staff, which, you know, like those are great jobs, but it, you know, it's not what you're expecting when you've just invested all of your time, energy and money in educating yourself to the MA level, you know.
Well,
so,
there is a possibility of teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, the teaching positions are fewer and further between. And for example, if you wanted to be teaching poetry, then you really you want at least one collection of poetry under your belt, you know, before you're kind of like qualified.
Are you working on a poetry collection?
I am working on a poetry collection, which is actually a lot harder. At first I thought, right, you just need 50 or 100, between 50 and 100 poems, and you put them in a row, boom, you have a collection. Let's get somebody to publish it. But actually, you know, over the past year, I've gained such an appreciation of the work that goes into a poetry collection, how it is a story, you know, from start to finish. It's not just, you know, a random collection of poems. So I think even though I do have a lot of random poems, what I'm finding it hard in now is to try and find that topic that I'm interested in talking about and looking at from different angles, you know, upside down for that many poems.
Can you tell us something about writing one poem? How do you write your poems? When do you need a prompt? Do you wake up with a poem in your head? How does it work?
Well, a lot of the time I just have, you know, that you're thinking about one thing, and then this voice in your brain kind of like offers you like a little tidbit. Oh, that's interesting, or something like that. Or that's an interesting phrase, or oh, that's an idea. And no matter what I'm doing, I will always try and run to my phone and get out my notes app and kind of write down that little snippet. I know a lot of writers keep a notebook by their bed to write, you know, to write some of their dreams in the morning or their ideas in the morning, that kind of thing. So often an idea like that will just come to me and it'll be like, oh, that's interesting. And I know that if I feel that, oh, that's interesting feeling, that's a feeling that this is a topic that's worth pursuing. It might not go anywhere. But then kind of as soon as I can, depending on how interesting the idea is, I will try and like sit down and get to my keyboard or get to a pen and paper and just really loosely, you know, write down all the words, you know, like there's a saying that like, you know, just write down the words and don't worry about what kind of words are coming out. You have to write all the bad words before the good words can come out. So I just try and write as much as I can about that topic. Often it comes straight out in poetry. Sometimes it comes out in a block of really messy prose that then I go back and I edit and re-edit and re-edit and re-edit. And honestly, I'm definitely one of those poets that says that like my poems are never finished. There are very few of them are ever done. Like every time I'm doing a submission, I will be rewriting that poem. It might only be a word or two that's being changed here and there, but I have a document for my finished poems, and it's actually called, you know, can't call them finished. You know, they're just edited. So that would be kind of my.
How do you know? I mean, when you work on that, that is quite a mysterious process. How do you know what's better?
How do you I feel that it's better, you know, there's a feeling of rightness. So for example, there's one poem I'm working on at the moment, and I know that the first word is just wrong, you know, like I have an idea kind of what I want in there, but there's a feeling of wrongness about it. It's irritating me, it's frustrating me, you know, and every now and again I'm washing the dishes and another word will pop into my head and I'm like, oh yeah, that's much better, and I'll put that in, and I'm like, oh no, it still doesn't feel right.
What is the word that's wrong?
The word that it's cliche now at the moment, but this is on the third rendition. It was failure before, so it's like at the moment it's cliche blooms in the cracks, and then it was failure blooms in the cracks. So I need something to bloom in the cracks, but I don't like cliche and I don't like failure and I don't whatever. But
if you say blooms in the cracks, do you actually see a pavement with blooms in the cracks?
Well, it's more kind of like a kind of like it's not literally blooming in the cracks, which would make sense, a bit more sense with the rest of the poem, I suppose. So yeah, I kind of want something, you know, that would never be blooming in any crack, you know, to kind of make the line really interesting and make you go, oh, you know, what does that really mean? You know, like I am working a bit on trying to write poems that take a bit more unpacking, because I am very inclined to kind of write stuff that might be maybe a little bit too obvious, you know, at times. Whereas I do think like the magic of a really amazing poem is one that, you know, you can come back to again and again and again and see different things and have it apply to different situations, like a really good song, you know, like you're in love and it's all about love, and then, you know, something happens, you know, and then suddenly it's all about that, but it's the one song, you know, it's you who have changed, not the poem or the song or whatever. So that's kind of, I'm working on my craft in that respect at the moment. But yeah, definitely I feel like it's this feeling of rightness. Or even there's one poem of mine that I have not edited very recently, because every time I read it, it just kind of feels right. I can't think of anything else to put in there. Yeah.
What poem is that?
That is Burlesque, actually.
Okay, Burlesque. You're going to read that at session, and Burlesque won a prize, an award, and money.
Yeah, that's right. So I got an honorarium, which I was very grateful for from it was the Sligo Arts Festival this year, and the young curators there had a theme of mythology, and they asked Irish artists of all walks of life, you know, from the you know, like, you know, a painter or performance artist or poetry, whatever it is, to submit their works on mythology retold. And they chose 3 artists. So they chose a painter and a makeup artist and myself as the winners, I suppose, and awarded us honorariums, and we were featured at the festival. So that was really, really exciting to me, and especially since you know, that poem it's about gender and mythology, and it's something that I actually do feel kind of strongly about. So it was nice to have that one recognized. And also I felt very cool because it's the young curators. So it is young, you know, people who are in school going, early college, who were making that selection. So I felt very relevant. I was very honored to have been chosen. Yeah.
You are very relevant, actually. And can you say with Burlesque, what was the starting point for you? What was the starting sentence, for example?
Well, the starting sentence of Burlesque is 6 human shapes reflected, a slow, uncertain strip of tops, not sky-clad yet, but wrapped up in cold arms, ashamed, bent elbows to obscure impure nipples, brown and pink. And basically what it's about is, and one of our modules during the year was studying mythology. You know, you really can't be into literature in any shape or form without really having this background in mythology. And I hadn't studied it formally before, and it really struck me about the gender divide in mythology, you know, like especially, you know, the Greek and Roman mythology, you know, Zeus, who is amazing, is off doing terrible things to young girls left, right, and center. And it's completely like you know, it was just kind of accepted at the time. And there's lots of very interesting stereotypes and gender roles in there. So, and also I have a young child, she's a girl and she's 4. So I'm seeing the world, you know, differently with all these inspirations, or, you know, with these inputs, thinking about the gender question differently. And obviously there's a lot going on in, you know, our culture and social media to do with the gender issues and stuff like that. So all of that was swirling in my mind. And when I was in Vancouver, I lived in Vancouver for 10 years, I really enjoyed the burlesque scene over there. I really enjoyed the philosophy of burlesque. It's really all about, you know, women and men, but mostly, you know, stereotypically would be women taking control of, you know, their bodies, of their nudity, and not being ashamed of it, you know. And so I wrote a series of gender poems based on, you know, for that class, and to do with mythology, and taking kind of different angles of it. But the angle of burlesque definitely was this, you know, this average Irish person, woman with this philosophy to be ashamed of our bodies, that if something happens to us, then we were asking for it, you know, that we need, like, you know, and it came from the myth of Diana and Actaeon, where basically Actaeon spies Diana nude. And Diana is so angered by this. He didn't mean anything by it. He was actually one of the few innocent guys in all the mythology.
And she's the goddess of hunting, isn't she?
She is, yeah. And she transforms him into a stag, and then he was then hunted and ripped apart by his own hounds. So, and it was all for the fear of the male gaze, you know, like the male gaze would be. So I really honed in on the male gaze issue of that poem, and how the philosophy of burlesque is to just take back our own power, so we no longer have to fear the gaze of men.
Okay, that's beautiful. Okay, we're going to keep it a little bit short. One of the themes of the session is flash fiction, we've just discovered, and you're going to do a lovely exercise. Lauren is really great at coming up with fun exercises, so everyone's in for a treat. And you are going to read a bit of flash fiction without giving a full manual. What is flash fiction?
Yeah, flash fiction is really, really, really short fiction. So it can be anywhere between, you know, 200 and I'd say 1,000 words would be, if you're submitting flash fiction, that's kind of the range that they ask for. So really, really super short stories.
Okay, and you said you were going to give a little manual or a little tips and advice for people wanting to write flash fiction. We'll add that to the event and send it around in the email. And I can ask you now to read flash fiction, and at the end of it, I'll stop the recording, and then everyone who wants to know more can come to the DeBarra Spoken Word on December 1st. Okay.
Great.
Lauren,
thanks, Melissa.
Okay, thank you, Lauren.
And this flash fiction piece is called Vintage, and I wrote this using the kind of quick flash fiction technique that I'm going to share in the session, the DeBarra session. It's a little bit of a trick, so I think it'll be great for an exercise. And anyway, I used that trick to write this particular piece. It's only 300 words, so I think that like flash fiction is something that could really appeal to poets as well as writers of prose. You know, it's definitely a sweet spot between the two that I think you know, it's a pretty cool place if you're trying to push yourself. If you're a poet and you're trying to push yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone, I think flash fiction is the place to be. And there's loads of competitions and submissions and even more every year. So flash fiction is definitely hot, as they say. But anyway, vintage. I dare say this may be the vintage of the century. I don't know how you do it, but hats off to you. I smiled as I raised my toast to my host. We had a long relationship from lecture circuits and conference dinners, but it was only this past month I was invited to holiday at his vineyard and help with the newest batch of wine. I noticed something very strange immediately upon arrival. There were no vines on this land, not a single grape to be seen. I decided he must have greenhouses, like those digital ones they use in Iceland to grow bananas. How efficient. Exactly what I would expect from my host, hailing as he does from Europe, where they are famously hardworking. And how original, just like his sensational academic works on 17th century folklore. After dinner, tucked up in the guest bedroom with the whole house asleep, the drink rushed to my head all at once. I decided I must have some cheese. I didn't want to intrude, creeping around my host's home, but my stomach would not be dissuaded. I quickly reached the pantry, but there was scant food inside. I continued to hunt and found a pantry. How perfectly classic is it to have a pantry, much suited to my host and his timeless style. I found olives, bread, and oil, but still no cheese. At last, I located a large refrigerated door, like those at restaurants, where they hang the unfortunate carcasses of our future lunches. Success, I thought, until I opened it and was met with the most ghastly sight imaginable. Something heavy hit me in the head before I could turn to flee, and I crumpled to the floor, unconscious. I awoke, hanging upside down like a bat, with red tubes running from my elbows, knees, and neck. Now I am a vintage myself, the best of the century, the next batch might say. Which I just realized is very Halloween-y themed as well for the time of year. It's very good.
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren, and I'll see
Thank you,
on the
Moza.
3rd of December on Zoom.